Hi, all. DT Neal, talking to you a little more about storytelling. In this case, science fiction, writerly issues, questions, qualms, quandaries. Um, Picking up where I left off about, if we're able to colonize other planets, what responsibility do we have for those other animals, the ones that would be otherwise left behind? And the intricacy of the ecology of this planet would require some serious heavy lifting. And I also think about, it's all nice when you think, oh, well, we could bring horses or cows or buffalo or gorillas or, all these various things, goats, to other planets, theoretically. Again, not really carrying it out, that thought experiment, too far out, because it does get incredibly logistically complicated. In fact, it's only possible if things are going so smoothly in terms of the colonial effort, which itself is a massive lift. I know I already mentioned that the colonies could be established in a manner that would allow for something as seemingly superfluous as bringing animals. Okay, not even factoring in that stuff. I was thinking also, what about the animals that are kind of gross or people aren't so fond of, like lampreys? Are we going to bring lampreys into space? Or are we just going to leave lampreys behind? Mosquitoes. I mean, that one seems like an easy one. Like, screw that. We don't want to bring mosquitoes. Slime molds. All manner of protozoans. Do we bring those? Do we bring the malaria organism? Right? Plasmodium in space. I don't know. That was something that was done fairly well in the sci-fi horror movie Life, which you may or may not have seen. That's a pretty disturbing movie. But they discover some kind of cellular organism from some Mars samples, and let's just say when that thing comes to life, hilarity ensues. Not really, horror ensues on the space station that it's on, and it's a very, very hostile life form. Calvin is what they named it. Calvin, nasty. But anyway, related to that is those ideas, like what gets to travel to the new worlds, these hypothetical new worlds. Fleas? Are we bringing fleas? Any manner of parasites. Let's just throw parasites all across, like, are we bringing parasites, or will we just accidentally bring parasites? Or do you genetically do you scan any kind of life form you're transporting to make sure you're not bringing parasites? What gets to stay and what gets to go? And the lens of what do humans like versus what humans don't like is a factor too. You could look at stuff like mistletoe or orchids and go, oh, well, those are pretty. We need those. They're plant parasites. Are we going to bring plant parasites? Is those okay because they're aesthetically pleasing to people? And the ones that trigger the ick, they're like, nah, we don't really want that in that new world. Like snapping turtles. Are we going to make sure that snapping turtles get a lift off of the planet? There are a pile of varying, people don't even realize this because we're busy dealing with the disasters that we're creating here on our own, to ourselves and to the habitat, to the climate, to the country, to the world. Everything, all those, like, there's all these factors. And there are different routes you could take. There's a hardcore animal rights POV you could bring to and say, well, we owe it to all these species to give them a passage to these hypothetical colonies, theoretically. But even that view, how hardcore do you view all life, plant or animal life, on the earth as having a right to exist elsewhere? Or is it just the stuff that we consider harmless, that we like, that we approve of, that gets the pass? So it's a very even in the face of like a very hard animal rights POV, there's still a humanocentric bias in terms of what is an acceptable organism to to transport to another world. I don't have as I said earlier, I don't have a clean answer to it. It's an interesting thing to talk about. There's also there's an animal and plant conservation aspect, which is perhaps one step over from the hardcore animal and plant rights POV, which is if you view ourselves as stewards of life on this planet or caretakers of life on this planet, then is there a moral responsibility for an exodus and how we factor that in? And there's also this idea of, again, I'm taking it still another notch over, anyone who is involved in those industries, whether it's ranching or livestock, how does that factor in? Does some rancher who has, 10,000 head of whatever, does that person get a ticket to go colonize the new world? Or they're like, no, you're just going to bring like 2 or a minimal viable thing, which is even that's an extreme example I'm using, but like what would be the minimal viable population to transport up to another world? A lot of hard questions. No one really talks about that because there isn't any real clean answer to it. I don't think you can't. It's hard to imagine somebody advocating for the malaria mosquito, right? Or for any kind of parasitic organism. And yet some of those are so integral into the animal populations or plant populations that they infect and afflict, that it might come up anyway if somehow something passed through screening and didn't get blocked. And then there's also, what the hell does somebody do on a colonial world if they are a caretaker of those animals? I mean, think about the plight of the honeybee on Earth. I mean, honeybee populations are in terrible distress because of us. Let's be honest. How does that factor in? Is the utility of a species the deciding factor in what gets them a ticket off of this planet, if we had the means to do so? Is that the sole criterion? A lot of philosophical stuff, a lot of things I think people need to think about. And I like to think, and this is why I think science fiction is so good, because it allows the asking of those questions as if they were real, which then can inform our policies and how we might approach things getting to that point, even though we're not there yet. Because, we're nowhere near having viable extraplanetary colonies. We're not there yet. We may not ever get there. I mean, what we're doing right now is so disastrous. We may not ever have that. We may be as stranded here as everyone else. But I do think about it, and I do wonder about it. Who mourns for the moray eel? Or coral, the transportation of coral. I mean, logistically, that's hard. And again, it goes back to that issue. What if you take them to another planet, and for whatever reason, if there's enough life there in some fashion that it doesn't get along with what you've brought these invasive species, and then that's harsh too. Yeah, it's that kind of thing. It's easy to say, oh, I'm going to open up this box and there's my cubes of protein that I'm going to eat. And you think, oh, what's the sourcing of that? People don't necessarily dwell on that. But then you start talking about bringing horses to a colony, and then even from the perspective of the other colonists, they're like, oh, there's Bob and his fucking space horses. Jesus, what are we going to do about that? They're eating all the food, It's complicated. I freely admit it.